We don't know their origin because they don't want to communicate that to us.
Right. What about the crashes? There's been some references. I'm pretty skeptical when it comes to alleged UFO crashes, but I think you've made some comments. Maybe some others that have worked with ATIP have made comments that there may be a program to look into that, or there may have been crashes. You all feel?
There have been crashes. The superpowers on the Earth have had their share of crashes, and they have recovered the vehicles from their crashes. So that's why Jacques Vallée and I agree that even though these things behave like a conscious, spiritual, psychic entity, they do have a advanced technology. They have hardware, and there's a craft, and there's occupants or UFOnauts that he calls them, that Jacques Vallée calls them UFOnauts. So there's UFOnauts running these craft, whatever they may be. And he likes to make an analogy of these beings to the little people or the fairies of Europe and Ireland and Magonia. Remember that, the Passport to Magonia, one of his books, and that kind of thing. So that's fair enough. So anyway, they have that technology. We do too, and it's a very super sensitive topic, because it's something that your listeners are probably going to be shocked at. Probably less than 1/1000th or 1/100,000th of the United States military and the government overall doesn't even know about it. I'm sorry, I said that contradictory. I said probably a minute fraction, like less than 1/1000th or 1/100,000th of the people with the need to know access, need to know authorization, and security clearances to be involved with that type of work are the only ones that know. The vast majority of the rest of the government really doesn't know, and that's why one hand, like the right hand, doesn't know what the left hand is doing, virtually because of the stovepiping that goes on in compartmentalized programs. And you just can't knock on doors and say, hey, here's who I am, I've got clearances, but not the right ones. I don't have a need to know, but I want to know. So can you tell me? And you're going to be lied to, because that's the rule. You don't want to tell the enemy anything. And this guy who's knocking on your door asking you about UFO crashes could be an asset for the Soviet Union or the Russian Federation or the Chinese PLA or the nincompoops over in Iran and North Korea and so forth. So, even if it's an American, you still don't want to answer that question because you don't know who they are, and you're not supposed to be revealing that information. So it takes a lot of hard tracking and digging, you have to networking, and it can take years and years and years. And then you develop the security clearances and the authorization for need to know that appropriately allow you access to that information. Then you find out, hey, it's there, it's true. On the other hand, sometimes the information does come out on its own, but it doesn't come out in the way that ufology likes to fantasize about it. It comes out only to specific people who have specific talents and skills, who have security clearances. They may not have the need to know, but they could have the need to know if they were presented with that requirement, or if they were presented by a crash retrieval program and saying, hey, I want to bring in gentleman XYZ. He's got the security clearances, but he doesn't have the need to know. I want to give him the need to know because I need his talent to help us solve this problem with the crash retrieval reverse engineering studies. So then they will do that. Other times, that's the official way of doing it. That's how you officially get brought in. The other unofficial way is, again, you build a level of trust among certain individuals and people within the network who, after a few years of knowing them, you work with them, they know who you are, they know what you're capable of, they know your competencies, and they want to bring the topic up on an informal basis with you, sometimes not even on an informal basis. They may want to bring the topic up outside the realm of the security apparatus, but within a skiff. In other words, there's going to be no passing of security clearances to establish that I am going to be allowed to be read in on the crash retrieval program, but they'll bring me into a skiff and want to talk informally in the skiff about it and say, well, this is what we can tell you, but there's things that we can't tell you, and we can tell you those things if you can get the next level of security and authorization to get the need to know, and then we can do business with you. But before we get to that point, here's what we can tell you without having to cross that red line of the need to know and the proper clearances. So you work this stuff out over a number of years. You build networks and you find the right people, and then you don't do it by knocking on doors. You do it just through the happenstance of having a contract with somebody or a subcontract, and you're interfacing with them. And then, lo and behold, you find out they're the vice president or the president of one of the legacy aerospace corporations, and they happen to be a PhD of some sort of their, some discipline their own, a STEM discipline all on their own accord. And it just so happens that they were a guy that worked on the crash retrieval program. Oh, lo and behold. And then they find out that you're working in UFOs. You're on the UFO subject for a DoD program. And they'll say, well, that's wonderful. You're officially a government contractor or subcontractor, and you're working with another aerospace company. Okay, well, and you're working on UFOs. Well, guess what? We did it too. And we don't do it now, but we did it in the past, and here's what we can tell you off the record, and here's what we can, and you'll have to go another step before we can tell you what it is on the record, but it has to be through that. Again, you have to have the right clearances, you have to have the authorization for the need to know, and then you can get the full story. So it's a very complex process. It just, the way Steve Greer went about it for his disclosure program, that was called the shotgun approach. The shotgun approach means he was putting himself out there during the 1990s talking about crash retrievals. And I won't go through his whole story. I'm sure you've already covered it or other people have covered it. But one thing led to another, and he was like a bar magnet, tracking all these retirees from various parts of the government, U.S. military, who had some knowledge about the UFO subject and the crash retrieval subject in particular. And a good majority of them were crackpots. They were phonies. But there was a small number of them that were the real deal. And so he successfully picked up a very small number of them and got some information. And now, as to the veracity and quality of that information, that's another story. But he did get some interesting information. Okay, so...
Can you share with us who you think might have been the real deal?
So that's what
Could you share with us who you think might have been the real deal out of his witnesses?
No. What I mean is the
information.
The information was verifiable. In other words, once people looked into it, they said, "Yeah, this is realistic." Okay. Whereas a good chunk of his disclosure witnesses, you had middle of the road guys. They had some information, but it was too peripheral. It was just anecdotal. Mm-hmm. And then you had the guys that were real liars. He's got a chunk of liars out there I don't know how much effort he spent on vetting any of those people, and I'm not going to name names as to who they are. And it's not important because the fact that they have no real information means it's noise. We're dealing with signal. We're interested in signal in science, folks, not the noise. Chuck the noise. So he did have a small signal of people that had verifiable information. And unfortunately, that's, like I said, it's the shotgun approach. They came forward, they gave him information, that was freely given to him, but it was after the fact. It was nothing that could be acted on. The people that gave him information were, they weren't directly involved with crash retrieval at all. They actually were either peripheral or they heard it from somebody reliable. So the vertical information was high quality, but they were not first-hand people. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. People with first-hand knowledge or first-hand exposure to this whole subject. So he got pretty close, but that's the shotgun approach. That's where you're going to shoot the shotgun, your pellets are going to hit all over the wall, and there's going to be a small part of the wall where the pellets hit the right targets, and all the rest of the pellets, pretty much only just a few pellets hit the right target, and all the rest of the pellets just randomly hit a bunch of bad targets.
And the hard part is that the target's invisible. We don't know.
Yeah.
All we have is this spread of shotgun spray, but we don't know where the target is.
So here's the thing that you should know is that the crash retrieval program is a very small program. It is not a massive, huge government infrastructure. It's a very poorly funded program, and it probably hasn't had any money for a while. I do know that the program was terminated in 1989 for lack of progress in reverse engineering anything that they had, any of the hardware that they had. And they'll resurrect it every maybe so often, so many years go by, and they'll try it again, and they just don't succeed. Compartmentalization is a killer. Scientists cannot communicate with other scientists to get help. It's like I'm doing this first semester differential calculus homework problem. I'm doing the rocket equation, and I am stuck on the boundary conditions so I can come up with the right solution that gives me the right answer to the propellant mass flow rate. And I'm having a hard time. So what do I got to do? I'm missing something. I just don't know what I'm supposed to do with this and to be able to solve this differential equation. So I got to call my buddy who's in my class. He's a math whiz. And he's the one that gets straight A's. So I'm going to call him on the phone and say, help me with this. This is what I got done, and this is what I'm stuck on. And he'll explain it to me. Well, if you're in the crash retrieval program, or any black program for that matter, and you come up with a roadblock, a technical roadblock, you can't call your best buddy or any expert that you don't know and just call them cold and say, hey, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm working on, I'm stuck. What do you suggest I do to get past this roadblock? You can't do that.
Yeah, it's funny. Nick Pope had talked about the same problem when they did the Condign report. They genuinely had some intelligence people who wanted to look into the issue, but they had no access. They couldn't talk to anybody they weren't cleared for all of these things they wanted to write about, so they just had to speculate.
Yeah. So, and this isn't just unique to the crash retrieval program. This type of problem is unique to all of the black programs that the DoD has, DHS has them, the military services service branches has them, but Department of Energy has their own versions. And the purpose of a black program with the Special Access Program security wrap is you got to limit the information and exposure to the information to as few people as possible in order to produce the maximum security protection against espionage by the enemy. And so that limits who you can work with. That also is clear to know. That limits the amount of experts that you can have working with you. And gosh, if your small group of experts are stumped, you're screwed, because you basically can't call your buddies or somebody you know of who's an expert better than you, or a bigger expert on the subject at a university either near you or at a university across the country. You can't call those guys. You can't even read them in because you're not supposed to acknowledge most of these black programs are not supposed to be acknowledged. So, for that basis, you don't legitimately exist, so you can't tip off the university expert that there's a program by calling him and saying, I'm stuck on something. You just can't do it. If it's really dire and it's a problem that really the expertise is desperately needed outside of the cleared group, then the program manager and the security officer will write a justification to go reach out to the university expert and read him in on the program, and they'll have to be given security clearances and sign the NDA, fill out the SF-86 and all those forms and get the DD-254 filled out. And then they'll be told, you die with this information. You can never talk about it until after you die. So, till after you're dead. So that's how that works, and it happens in cruise missile programs. It happens mostly programs involving covert clandestine operations and their logistics. It happens with nuclear weapons development and deployment. It happens with intelligence operations, and it happens with technology development. And the interesting thing is that today there's a big move away from special access programs. They're extremely costly to maintain, extremely costly. Let me tell you this. The cost to maintain information, personnel, and physical security for a special access program can be tens of times larger than the cost of the program itself. So let's say the program is building the B-21 bomber, right? Let's just assume, let's say for the sake of argument, that the bomber project is $50 billion total. That's probably not even reasonable, but I'll just say that for figure. The security for that could be as much as 10 times higher. I mean, it could be stretched out over a number of years, of course, not all at once. So it could be as much as 10 times higher because you've got to maintain all kinds of security. Now, That's just hypothetical.
That's amazing. So we're pretty much out of time.
Okay.
Yeah, so I want to ask you one last question, and it has to do with the technology development, like you had just mentioned. But essentially, the goal, I think it's been your goal and Hal's goal, and it's To the Stars goal, is to actually use what you've learned from the observation of the phenomena to develop a technology. Do you think that's possible, and is that possible in the near time?
Probably. It's hard to predict. It's really hard to predict. It probably is long term, not near term. Some of these projects that were, like, for example, that's what the 38 papers that the TIA wanted in their tasking through Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies contract was to take the physics and engineering of 2009 and 2010, extrapolate it to 2050. Are we going to be able to have a physics and engineering and a technology industrial base that'll produce a vehicle that'll match the Tic Tacs by 2050? Because what if the Tic Tacs decide all of a sudden to turn against us, and they use their advanced weaponry, whatever they have, and start hurting people, start destroying things? I mean, we haven't seen that happen, but we've seen hints of that during Blue Book's investigation of the Northern Tier SAC encounters with the giant UFOs that shut down their warhead navigation systems. And that happened multiple times. That happened in the late 60s and happened in the mid-70s. And so we know that they're quite capable of rendering our nuclear warheads and ICBMs useless, which is really dangerous, because if the Soviet Union had decided to launch a war right then and there, just coincidentally, the damn UFOs had rendered it impossible for us to do a counterstrike, because our goddamn ICBMs up in the Northern Tier were shut down. So that's an example of when it gets bad. And then there's Polaris. Polaris is an example where the box-shaped UFOs, I think called Chupas, were actually killing some people and injuring large numbers of people. Wow. And they were using beams to do it. And I'm sure you're familiar with the Polaris case from the 1970s, I think it was.
Somewhat.
And that was Project Plate. That's what the Brazilians call Project Plate, I believe. So the Brazilian Air Force. So that's, the UFOs have not been benevolent. They have not shown any brotherly, space brotherly love and peace type movements toward us. It's all been just hide and seek. We use stealth as much as possible so that humans don't see us in the environment. And then when we want to expose ourselves, we expose ourselves, do our little fun games, and then take off. And they may be testing our technology. They may be testing the U.S. Navy's capabilities when they do this. And also they've done it with the Air Force, too. So, what are they doing it for? Well, again, they're not humans, so they don't think like humans.
Right.
They're doing it for whatever. In case they decide to become aggressive, we're screwed. Basically, we don't have aircraft that can match them. We haven't shot at them. Those, the Nimitz was out on a certification training to get certified to go deploy at the Persian Gulf in November 2004. And so for the certification training, they just have their fighters taking off the carrier deck of Nimitz and flying around doing maneuvers, but they're not armed because they're not supposed to be. You don't want them shooting at your fellow planes. It's not a red. I think they might have had red team, blue team things going on.
Yeah,
or they might have just been doing routine. Yeah. So, but you can't have live ammunition for
right.
that. When they want to do bombing and strafing, they do that out at the Nevada Air Force weapons testing range near the test site. And that's where they can do all the strafing and bombing they want with live ordnance. But when you're over the ocean and you're near ships and you've got your buddies in the air and a red team, blue team type configuration, you can't have live ordnance.
Right.
They had no way of shooting them down. They were asked if they were armed so they could attempt to shoot one down, or just at least send off a missile or fire some guns to kind of scare the UFO into responding. And the pilot said, no, we're not armed. We don't have anything. They couldn't shoot them down. So that was a test that could not be performed to determine whether you could shoot one down. So we just don't know, but you got to worry about it. That's what intelligence and military doctrine are all about. It's about planning for potentialities, and we have to worry about something more advanced could be overwhelming our military technology. And so we've got to be able to extrapolate to 2050. Will our physics be there? Will our engineering be there? Will our industrial manufacturing technology be there to produce tic-tac type technologies? And on the flip side of that, boy, that would be wonderful if we could get there. because commercially it would revolutionize transportation and energy on the earth, for all countries. So TTSA is looking to benefit. That's a public benefit corporation, so they're looking to benefit the public with this. We're not looking at making weapons. The military needs to look at making the weapons, and that's why we had the 38 papers.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So that was a lot of help. That was a lot of information. Thank you so much. It's great that you talk fast because there's a lot of information to convey. But it was an absolute pleasure to have you on, and I hope we can have you on again one day.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you very much, and I enjoyed helping you out with your show. Maybe we'll reconnect in the future.
Thank you so much for Eric Davis coming on the show. Really important to have him at this moment in time because of all this exciting stuff going on. And he's a key player when it comes to all of this.